Hi, welcome to Random Walks of HR with me, Tim Peppers, and today I want to tell you about the first ever engagement survey that I ever broke down, and the day that I found out that sometimes your most engaged employees are sometimes your worst managed. So this is the story of Team Z. So before the engagement survey results came out, I looked at the previous year's results, and the big standout was Team Z was massively disengaged. People really unhappy, and we were all so happy and excited when the new results came out. We saw that Team Z had gone from last right up to first. Huge jump, hopping over every other team, and everyone's like, what a brilliant example of engagement in the workplace. Action planning, taking accountability, making the workplace better, and etc., etc., etc. The problem was all these things weren't true, because when we started diving into the data, we found us something really interesting. See, what actually happened with Team Z was that their last year, loads of people were massively disengaged. Loads of detractors in the team, shown here in red, only a few happy employees. So what happened? Well, most of them left. They either left the company or they moved internally into different roles. And then the company rehired and replaced them with new employees. Now, the thing with new employees is there's a thing called the honeymoon effect. And this is pretty standard of every engagement survey, every ENPS survey that I've ever seen. New employees always have this big spike, usually for the first year, but it can be as short as 3 months. It can be as long as 2 years, depending on that kind of culture and how good your onboarding experience is. But you always have this engagement boost when either the things that drove you to leave your last company are no longer there, like a terrible manager or a massive commute, or those little perks and little nice things and those new opportunities, that new role that you wanted kicks in. The problem is, after about a year, the hedonic treadmill kicks in and things become normal. And that thing that you loved at the first time you joined the company, like fresh fruit in the kitchen on a Monday morning, becomes a frustration or becomes expected. If you don't get there by 9 a.m. or 8:30 a.m., all the apples and bananas are gone, so you're just left with squashy pears and slightly weird looking kiwis. So what happened with Team Z is that all these new people come in, had that honeymoon, boosted the average score to above the company average, and then suddenly it masked the fact that actually a lot of those problems were still there. And actually, not all those disengaged employees left. And within a year, what happened? The honeymoon period came over, the team scores went from lowest to highest, and then down back again, and we were just starting this horrible cycle of disengagement, employees leaving, and then new employees coming in, artificially boosting and hiding some of those engagement and maybe cultural issues within the team. And it's not just turnover we should be worried about when we think about the honeymoon period. It's also something you need to account for when you're in a high growth mode, right? If you have 1,000 employees, you hire another 1,000 employees, 50% of your workforce are honeymooners. You can have a huge engagement score. But then if you hire another 1,000 the next year, well, only a third of the workforce is going to be honeymooners. Another 1,000, only a quarter. And what happens when you plateau, when you stabilize? Artificially, your scores will drop, but it's not the workplace culture. It's not anything else internal. It's just the fact that you don't have so many honeymooners. The same thing can be for seasonal staff, right? If you hire loads of staff for the summer in April and they all leave in September or October, that might be masking that little honeymoon period for those new joiners who never worked for the organization before. That might be hiding some of the underlying issues within your permanent year-round staff. And there's other things that affect the engagement scores that aren't necessarily driven by the company and the culture. Engagement scores vary depending on what kind of grade and seniority and what kind of role you have in the organization. There's also regional norms. Different countries have different standards and different norms when they're answering surveys and saying, would you recommend this company to a friend or a colleague? So you've really got to count for all these things when you're doing your engagement surveys and when you're trying to measure success through engagement. How do you do that? Very simple way. You just take out the honeymooners. You work out where your honeymoon period is and you exclude, you control for that bias by just looking at those employees who've been at the company for at least a year or 2 years or however long your honeymoon period is. If you want to get super data sciencey, you can use statistics and data science to predict and adjust for some of those factors. And then you can compare whether an employee's engagement is actually higher or lower than what you would expect, given their tenure, given their seniority, given their location. That's a little complex, and there's a nice middle point where it's just benchmarking. We can do this on an individual level, and group people, or we can do this on a team level and compare teams against teams, but look at what kind of work they're doing, what's the average age, maybe what percentage of the team are new starters, and think about all those other things that might impact engagement or ENPS, and then start comparing team to team rather than against the whole generic company. And that way we're going to have much more accurate benchmarks. Understand that actually this team in high growth should be having much higher engagement compared to what it's having at the moment. And that can undercover some insights that give us a better idea of what's actually happening in the team. I hope this story is useful. I hope that you enjoyed the video. I'm going to post some more stuff on LinkedIn asking for more recommendations over which stories would be useful to say. So please do subscribe to the video and also follow me on LinkedIn to have your say on what stories and what data insights are going to be shared with you in the future. Thank you for your time, and I hope this hasn't been a complete waste of your time. Goodbye.